What's up, everybody? Hello, Hawkeyes, and welcome in. It is Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live. We are your hosts, Josh Elmer, alongside Chris Meglio. Chris, my man, how we doing tonight?
Doing good, man. Anytime we get this opportunity like this to have a show, which is our second one now, you know, um, it's a great thing. It's a beautiful day out here in Iowa City. I don't know how it is out where you are, but beautiful day out here. We like to be outdoors, but if I'm going to be indoors, much rather be doing the show. And there's a lot we got to get into. So, it's going to be a good show for sure.
We got a lot to talk about, and let's just dive right into the big Iowa football news amongst quite a bit of Iowa football shuffling of late with the spring transfer portal window open. Iowa has struck that man right there, George Barnett, who was one of the conductors of a nice turnaround up front for Iowa last season. Obviously, you give a lot of credit to Caleb Johnson, but you got to give a lot of credit to the guys up front paving the way for Caleb Johnson a season ago for morphing Iowa back into the rushing attack that I think Hawkeye fans are accustomed to. Chris, well, they have found a name to go ahead and familiarize yourself with. Bryce George, an All-American at Ferris State, a national champion 3 times over at Ferris State. 3 out of the past 4 years, Ferris State won the Division II national championship. Bryce George, come on down. And I know that you had a chance to dive into Bryce's tape. We wondered, you had kind of heard the rumblings that Iowa was going to be on the lookout for an offensive lineman or two or a couple of offensive linemen out of the transfer portal. But they've struck. They've landed Bryce George. What's your reaction to the newest addition to the Hawkeyes?
It's a huge pickup, man. I mean, you got to think about it, man. When I did my background on him, he reminded me of Mark Gronowski, just obviously not position-wise, but in the terms of what he's been able to do at his previous school, just being a multi-time winner. Anytime you bring a guy in like that, I don't care what level you're on, if you're able to be a key player on a winning team that consistently wins, that's saying something about your game. Now he's coming to the Hawkeyes where we lost a couple of, prominent linemen. God bless, we're going to get some back. But to have him, he could come in and be an impact player right away, even though we'll only have him for, 1 year. That 1 year, he could do a lot. And that 1 year for, especially, we're going to need an upgrade at the lineman, losing Caleb Johnson, to make room for Kamari Mole and Jazz Patterson in the gaps. He could be big time for that. Like, huge player, 6'5", 314. He chose us over, Cal and USC, so that's pretty big. And, 2-time All-American, that's pretty big right there. So, to have him, it'll be a good addition, and we'll see whether he'll be able to find his footing right away and be a key piece for us.
The one item you mentioned right there, I don't think is a small detail in all of this. To win out in this recruitment over really, both USC and Cal, but in particular, USC, to win that now interconference recruiting battle for somebody that Iowa expects to come right in and help them. And Chris, I think it's fair to say the expectation is that Bryce George is coming to Iowa City, and the thought is that he's going to be a starting offensive tackle for the Hawkeyes. So to win that recruiting battle versus really, again, both USC and Cal, but especially heads up versus USC, that's big news for the Hawkeyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll be able to see, man. And, you got to – it's going to be something for him just because at Ferris State, he was a right tackle. Right now, he's projected to be left tackle for us. So we're going to see how he fares out in that space. I'm sure that him being a 3-time national champion, he knows how to adjust. He knows that, when stuff hits the fan, he knows how to, adjust pretty quickly. And I'm sure that, coming to the Hawkeyes in the Big Ten, he's on one of the biggest stages, if not the biggest stage you could be on for football. He's not going to take that for granted. He's going to do whatever he can to be on the field, especially for his last year. And I'm sure for a guy like him, he wants to make his name known. He wants a chance to become pro. That's what most of these guys do it for. So, hopefully he can come in and just be a huge, huge boost to what we have lost this offseason. Not like we lost a ton, but, we had a big year last year in terms of the jump we made as an O-line. So hopefully he could add on to that. We could have a better year.
ranked as a 3-star transfer portal pickup for, whatever that is worth out there for you. The number 39 offensive tackle, 546 player nationally, according to On3. And obviously, as you touched on, the thought is that he's probably your starting left tackle for Iowa. Now, it kind of depends on the person. Certain players, maybe it's a big time adjustment going from the right side to the left side. And for Iowa, if indeed Bryce George, who comes over from Ferris State, if he is your starting tackle, one of the two, Chris, then that sets it up to where either Jennings Dunker or Bryce George, one of the two, is moving to the left side, you would think, right? Because I don't see Jennings Dunker getting supplanted from a starting offensive tackle spot for Oklahoma, or for Iowa, excuse me. It'll be interesting to see, though, which of the two makes that shift over. And for different guys, it's maybe more challenging than for the other. So let's hope that for Bryce George, he's one of the types of players, Chris, to where it's not a big challenge for him to shift from the right side to the left side. Obviously, when you start thinking about trying to make money, you can make a lot of money by being a great left tackle.
Mm-hmm. They can make a lot of money in a lot of places in football these days, man. These kids are getting paid heavy. But, you got to think, Jennings Dunker being such a key piece for us, I'm sure that he's not going to be the one that, Coach Ferris or, whoever else wants to switch over. I'm sure, like I said, Bryce George is going to make the adjustment. He's coming here looking to start. He's going to do whatever he can to start. And, to have him, now you pair him up with, you brought Logan Jones back, Jennings Dunker, you got Bo Stevens. So to have those four and, whoever that fifth guy is, that's a pretty prominent O-line we have. And you got to think about, how the offense is shaping up now. Now that you got yourself an O-lineman, now you got Sam Phillips coming in, now you got a receiver, then you got two quarterbacks. The offense is shaping out to be, it's going to look pretty good. And maybe even just a better offense overall last year. Last year we made a jump, but it's probably nowhere near we want to be. So now the offense is looking good. And now you can add it to that, that run game where probably still going to be just as heavy as last year. You got to feel good about it. He's going to be a great addition, man. And he's a winner. So he should help us win. I see him being an impact player right away. No matter if he's on the right side, left side, he's going to be an impact player. And Hawkeye fans will see that come the fall.
Left tackle, right guard. Those are the two spots for Iowa that you're looking to replace starters. So now you start thinking about it, and Bo Stevens, Logan Jones, Cade Pieper is somebody that you hear a lot of good things about. And now Jennings Dunker. And this, the other part of this too is for Dotzler and for Trevor Luck, this buys you some more time with those two guys. And now there's not pressure on them to just get thrown into the fire of Big Ten football and for something to not go quite right. You're replacing Mason Richmond, who was a 4-year starter for the Hawkeyes, and you found somebody that can just plug right in and hopefully allow those guys, Chris, some time to continue developing and, protect that all-important blind side for Mark Gronowski and let him go be a playmaker for the Hawkeyes under center.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting that we were able to win them over USC. One being weather-wise. I mean, this is crazy. To choose a school like this where the winter time can be so brutal over Sunnyside, California, that's a big thing. I think it says a lot about, what the school stands for, what he really saw with the program. Not like weather matters to him too much, but also another thing is we are expected to have a very mobile quarterback in the backfield, along with, having a running back like Kamari Moulton, who gets compared to Aaron Jones. Don't forget that. So you got to think that to have someone like him who is quick to adjust, who is, like I said, a proven winner, to have him strengthen the run game as is already going to be strengthened with such dynamic legs behind the O-line, you got to feel good about, how the offense is going to shape out and just the mobility that's going to – all the type of run sets we're going to use next year. I guess I could say more as I start looking at spring practice. We got some stuff coming up. We got the We got the Kids Day event that's coming up, and that's something I'll really look out for. But that's just the initial thoughts, man. There's not really too much to say, but it's exciting.
Let's hope that he's great, right? And again, I think it's a big time get for Iowa that you win out over USC and you address out of the transfer portal a position that probably you needed to buy. Maybe a little bit more time for a couple of left tackles in the program. You give Locke a little more time, Dotzler a little bit more time. And if there was some uneasiness from the staff about one of the most important positions in football, Chris, now in this revenue share era that you're entering into, left tackle has to be a position that you feel great about, right? Really both tackles, but left tackle you need to feel great about. I'm sure that Iowa has made a very significant investment in Gronowski, its quarterback, and so at a premium is protecting Gronowski and getting somebody that he feels comfortable on the left side of that offensive line. Looks like Iowa in a battle versus one of its Big Ten foes at USC. Looks like obviously they found that guy in Bryce George. So no small thing. And in this era of the transfer portal, Iowa is not going to be involved in trying to bring in 25, 30 guys each offseason, Chris, but they're going to find 7, 10, maybe as many in a given year as like a dozen. They're going to find 7 real impact players for them, and I think they found one of those guys right here in Bryce George. So it's a happy day for Hawkeye fans that they've been able to address a big need for them. Oh, by the way, not the only addition that Iowa has made. They also went ahead and, though obviously it's not going to be maybe as heralded, you went and got a long snapper, Bryant Worrell, who was a starting long snapper for Boston College. Again, you only know the long snapper if things go horrifically wrong, Chris. So let's hope that, Bryant Worrell celebrating with a Heroes trophy or another trophy game here mixed in. But let's hope other than that, we're not talking about Bryant Worrell too much. Outside of, hey, special teams looks good and he's been sharp in it. But this is a addition that probably, understandably, is not going to get a ton of fanfare, but significant development for Iowa because they replaced somebody that, well, he was around for a long time and played a lot of football for the Hawkeyes.
Yes, he was, man. If anything, if you know Hawkeye football, we love our special teams for good or for worse, one reason or another. And to get Bryant Worrell, think about it, long snapper is not the most ideal position. Fans won't get as excited for, but he was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. He was a 11th ranked long snapper in the class 2020, but he has had an interesting journey. He was at Old Dominion for 2 years. That's an FCS school, but for some reason didn't appear, leave that as it is. But then he went to Emory and Henry, played 14 games across 2 seasons, made a name for himself, then went to Boston College, had a good season. He even got a fumble recovery last year. So I think that says a little something about him and his ability to, affect on a special teams level. Now he comes here, and after losing a guy like Luke Elkin, for those who don't know too much about Luke Elkin, he was with us for 4 years, and he was an All-American last year. He appeared in 53 games for the Hawkeyes across 4 seasons. Now he has pro aspirations. So, good luck to him on that. We'll certainly miss him. But then, we were left with, Ike Speltz, and we haven't seen too much of him yet. He's entering his redshirt freshman season. So, not like you can't trust him, but we definitely needed some experience in that field. So now to get this long snapper who should be effective for us, it's a very small but could be big addition in key moments. So we're going to see what that looks like.
And LeVar Woods and Iowa, we know, take great pride in the third phase of football. It's a part of the game where Iowa wins football games because they value that third phase in a way that a lot of other programs, their Big Ten counterparts, sometimes don't value as highly, right? Certainly the programs that are used to rolling in 4-star and 5-star talent on a regular basis out of the high school ranks. Iowa puts an emphasis on special teams, and so it's not a surprise to see that this would be one of the transfer portal additions for the Hawkeyes, but good news to go ahead and address the third phase, the Hawkeyes adding another transfer portal commitment. So not just Bryce George of late, but you got the Boston College long snapper Bryant Worrell as well, who again was the Eagles long snapper in all 13 games last season, and it replaces Luke Elkin, who had played in 53 games, was a rock for the Hawkeyes over the last 4 seasons at long snapper. And for Bryant Worrell, you get to come right in and be a part of some pretty good specialists alongside you. I mean, look, there's an all-timer that Reese Dakin is stepping in for last season in Torrey Taylor, and I thought did a pretty good job. Reese Dakin in his first year on campus, that Aussie pipeline to Iowa City just rolling right along. And obviously Drew Stevens has been a solid kicker for the Hawkeyes. So a couple of good specialists that Bryant Worrell will get to work with hand in hand on a regular basis.
Of course. And, you know, the long snapper, like we touched on, not the most exciting position, but you got to think about how we were so passionate. Hawkeye fans are so passionate about Torrey Taylor, knowing that, you know, if our offense falls apart, we don't get to where we should on 4th down, you know, Torrey Taylor is going to set us up for success. Going to punt that ball within the 10 very consistently. Well, you got to think about the long snapper is setting the punter up for, you know, a successful punt. So to get a guy like him who will set up now Reese Dakin for successful punts, you know, hit him with accuracy. And so Reese Dakin could get our defense started all the way down on the other side of the field. You know, like we said, small addition, but could have a big impact in very key moments. So just look out for that. Special teams will be a little more exciting with this guy here.
Well, speaking of transfer portal developments, the transfer portal gives and unfortunately the transfer portal takes. What was your initial reaction? Not to John Nestor entering the transfer portal, someone that I would say, Chris, when he came to Iowa, there was, you know, some high expectations that John Nestor could be a difference-making defensive back for the Hawkeyes. But obviously he chooses to go elsewhere, and where he chooses to go will leave Iowa fans maybe feeling some kind of way. John Nestor behind enemy lines to Minnesota. What's your reaction to Nestor joining the Gophers?
Oh, man. It's one thing to lose him to the portal. It's another thing to lose him to a Big Ten foe in the portal. And it's an extra another thing to lose him to a very familiar kind of enemy-like Big Ten opponent like Minnesota. You know, he was shaping up to be a key player for us next year. Now he'll be a key player for the Gophers. I just hope that our offense, you know, makes him regret leaving the Hawkeyes, man. You don't to leave a defensive system like this and to go to Minnesota, you know, we as Hawkeye fans, we just wish him the best of luck over there, except when he plays us. So good addition for them. We'll have to see who comes in and replaces him, whether that's someone that steps up on the Iowa team, someone from the portal. We'll have to see on that, but tough loss. He was a part of a busy day for Iowa yesterday in terms of him and also getting, you know, the long snapper and someone else we should touch on too. But, you know, he was a busy day for us, but that was one of the negatives of yesterday for sure.
Yeah, John Nestor, former Iowa defensive back, revealing that he is committed to Minnesota. So let's hope that, I don't know, Jacob Gill or Caden Weegan or Reese Vander Zee or Sam Phillips, that one or a couple of those guys can remind John Nestor where he came from, right, this next season.
Mm-hmm. Let's hope, man. Hopefully, like I said last show, I'm high on Reese Vander Zee, so, you know, hopefully you can go for a 50-yard touchdown on him and, you know, make him pay for leaving. You don't leave the Hawkeyes if you're a defensive player. That's one thing you don't do.
Well, then other than that, obviously, wish John Nestor well. So long as it's not at Iowa's expense, I think we're all good. The Hawkeyes are also linked to some other transfer portal talent out there. So we continue to watch what's going to transpire with Iowa in the transfer portal. I think somebody asked last week, hey, do you guys suspect now that Brendan Sullivan is on the move, that maybe the Hawkeyes would try to go find another quarterback out of the transfer portal? Well, that answer. That question was answered very quickly that, yeah, the Hawkeyes would love to go ahead and add more quarterback depth, and they are linked to a Wake Forest quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeremy Heklinski, I believe I'm saying his name right. You know, like we said, the transfer portal doesn't stop. No matter how good your team is, you got to keep looking for additions. And not to say our quarterback room is short, but there's always more to add. He didn't appear last year for Wake Forest, but 6 foot, 185-pound quarterback, with the intangibles, with his size, there's some potential there. He was a 3-star prospect, number 40 in the class 2024. And, Iowa initially did not go after him out of college or out of high school, I should say. So for him to be pursued by Iowa now, it makes you wonder what's happened transpired the past year that is making them look at him. But nonetheless, you got to feel pretty good if Kirk Ferris and them see something in him. Losing Brandon Sullivan, we only lost him about, I believe on this day, 10, 11 days ago. So Hawkeyes are moving quick. We already added 2 quarterbacks for next year. We have 2 more returning. And, should he commit to us, it'll be a 5th one.
Couple of defensive backs out there that have been tied to Iowa, Chris. Gavin Edwards of North Greenville actually had a cup of coffee this spring at Austin Peay, and then obviously jumped back in the portal. He has been linked to the Hawkeyes, as has Shahid Barrows, who is a South Dakota defensive back, and Barrows has set up his official visit to Iowa City for later on this week. So the departure of John Nestor, it could be getting filled in short order. It certainly, if nothing else, whether it's Gavin Edwards from North Greenville, if it's Shahid Barrows from South Dakota, it seems pretty obvious that Iowa is interested in going ahead and supplementing that defensive backfield. They want some secondary help.
Mm-hmm. And as they should, you got to keep looking. Losing a player like him, you got to move quick. And to look at those two, and for Barrows to have actually set up his official visit, I'm not too sure if Gavin Edwards has done that yet. I know Gavin Edwards has a lot of offers from a lot of colleges right now, but to be on Barrows right now specifically, for him to have set up his official visit, meaning he's taking the Hawkeyes very serious. He's really looking at us, so that's a high chance we could get him. Not too familiar who else is going after him. I know that Gavin Edwards, it is like East Carolina, Tulsa, Old Dominion, Ball State, Wake Forest, and Maryland. They're all looking at him. So could we beat out those schools? It's very possible. Gavin Edwards, I know, has 3 years of eligibility left. So should we get him, we would have him for a couple of years, bearing, if he enters the portal again. But it's seeming like Barrows, if we're going to get one of those two, Barrows might be the favorite right now out of those two to land. And hopefully he doesn't get a cup of coffee with us like he did at Austin and Peay. I mean, I'm sure he's only entering the portal just because he's getting big offers. And when you're getting bigger offers like that, you gotta look at those.
With a school and a program like Iowa that has been known to turn over rocks, find diamonds in the rough, that is kind of the Hawkeye MO, right? Is, hey, we're going to at times look places that others don't, and we're going to value our evaluations. We are going to value our ability to develop. And even if this individual doesn't have a bunch of offers from a bunch of brand name schools, we're going to go offer them, and we're going to get them, and we're going to bring them in, and we're going to trust that our evaluation and development is right on the money. So with that long-winded narrative out on the forefront here, how much do you put into some of the schools that other offers that players Iowa is tied to out of the transfer portal? How much do you pay attention to the offers train? Who else is in the mix?
Mm-hmm. It's something to look at. You always got to be wary of the other schools that are looking at him, especially the Big Ten ones. Those are the ones you really want to, beat out. But I think, like you said, something that Iowa has a reputation of that other schools might not is getting those, mid-tier players, ones that aren't as highly, not a 4-star, 5-star, but Iowa has a reputation of getting those 3 stars and the ones that haven't been seen, taking them in, developing them, and getting them to a place where they've always aspired to be. I'm sure that's a part of the pitch. And we have a rich history of that. So, anyone who's in a mid-major right now, or someone who's not as highly followed coming out of high school, that's got to bring some eyes to us. And I'm sure that's what's happening with these two DBs. And knowing that there's an opportunity for them to come in and kind of start right away, it's got to be really intriguing considering we're in the Big Ten as well.
In Phil Parker, we trust. Phil Parker, just whoever you offer, we're good with that. I mean, isn't that kind of how it is? What about all of you guys? Thanks for hanging out with us on this Monday night, where we will be hanging out with you every Monday night at 6 o'clock. Maybe we shuffle that around every now and again. We are your hosts. I'm Josh Helmer. He is Chris Meglio, right here of Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live. Tell us in the chat, who do you guys want the Hawkeyes to target? Are there some names out there that you are interested in? What position groups do you think that Iowa can continue to supplement before obviously this spring portal window is over? I know that we're approaching the end of the spring portal window, at least in terms of putting your name into that transfer portal, but you still got a couple of weeks even after that, maybe even a month after that for arrivals to officially get announced and for folks to make up their minds. So this, while you have that hard, fast end date of the transfer portal, you kind of don't. This could still be going on for, the weeks and months to come, which, hey, for the purposes of this show, I hope that we do have some transfer portal folks to talk about. I think defensive backfield, the secondary, that's an obvious need for Iowa. If they could go find a corner, that would be good. And it looks like Gavin Edwards, one of the defensive backs we're talking about, he is, at least according to his social media feed, which I don't know if Gavin Edwards' social media feed would agree with Phil Parker and the defensive staff's assessment at Iowa, but he's listed as a safety on his X feed. So maybe Iowa is looking to go find not just quarterback help, but somebody to help out Xavier Wampa and Lutmer and let's see, Cohen Intringer. Maybe they're trying to find more than just cornerback help. Maybe they're trying to find some safety help too.
Mm-hmm. And funny thing is, when I put his name in, Gavin Edwards, Iowa, on the internet, Google AI has him listed as an Iowa Hawkeyes defensive back. Just a funny thought. Maybe that's a tall telling sign of, what's to come in the short future. But yeah, you can never get too much help, and whether he's a safety, he's a cornerback, if I was looking at him as for a reason. Iowa, like you touched on earlier, they know what a diamond in the rough looks like. So hopefully he does come. I'm sure he'll be a good player. At the very least, he'll challenge some of those established guys, step up their game, because knowing that you'll bring someone in, and most likely you're not bringing them in just to, keep them on the bench and not play them. You're going to look to play them. But Gavin Edwards, if he comes here, has to challenge Xavier Nwampa. He has to challenge Lubmer. He has to challenge Entringer and push them to have a better season than we did last year.
We've got the open spring practice right around the corner, so that's kind of exciting. We'll have that to react to. And curious what all of you want to see from the open spring practice. What has your attention? Mine will be, and with the understanding that, hey, Gronowski is still on the mend, that you're not going to get full speed Mark Gronowski out there running around. So, evaluating the offense in this thing is going to be challenging to do. But, wide receiver, I think, is an interesting position group for Iowa to follow in the open spring practice, as is the offensive line, how it's gelling. So really, any chance you get to see the offensive and defensive lines, the good on good there, you're always curious what that is going to look like. But we can kick that around in just a moment. What are you guys looking forward to out of the open Iowa spring practice? It's right around the corner. We'll be reacting to a lot of that. The Hawkeyes have picked up a couple of recent commitments in the 2026 class. So that 2026 recruiting class is starting to come together, Chris. You got a wide receiver. You got another offensive lineman that come on down in the 2026 class for the Hawkeyes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start off with the receiver, DeAndre Smith. A pretty big, small but big pickup. He was a 3-star prospect by Rival, so he's not a super highly talented recruit by no means. But man, I mean, just watching this huddle film, I mean, this guy's speed is off the charts. That's the first thing that stands out in every single video where he has the ball in his hands, is his ability to just find space and just take off where nobody could touch him. And to be 5'11" and have that speed, that's something that could be really intriguing for fans, as he comes here in 2026, and he was a part of that, big day that I guess the Hawkeyes name was mentioned a couple times yesterday. We offered him in January of this year, commits a couple months later. So, we're blessed to beat out everybody in Miami, Florida, Michigan State, Indiana, and Maryland. So there were a couple Big Ten forwards in there that were looking at him and that we were able to steal him away from. And, he joins a class that, is a top 25 recruiting class for 2026, and the addition with the other guy who just signed a little bit less than an hour before the show, Gene Riordan from Chicago, Illinois. Shout out my suburbs guys. Hinsdale Central, he's from 6'5", 290. And per On3, he was ranked as the #1 player in Illinois. So to get someone like him, to add to that O-line, I'm sure we're going to lose a couple pieces next year, bearing eligibility reasons. But, he could be a guy who comes in and, impacts a line right away. He's quick on his feet. And every time, on every play, he just seems to drive guys through the ground, whether the ball's on the other side of the field. He's still driving the guy down on the field on the right side when the ball's on the left. It forces guys outside. So, that'll be interesting recruits. It just adds to a lot of excitement that we should have in come 2026.
Gene Riordan thought to be an interior offensive lineman, so guard, center, at least according to the projection from 24/7 Sports, which 6'4", 275 is what he's listed right now. So, not out of the realm of possibility that you could slide outside, but at least for the moment, thought to be an interior offensive lineman for Iowa. They've got a bunch of linemen already in the boat in this 2026 class. You've got Carson Nielsen as a part of that group. You've got Owen Linder a part of that group. Colin Witters is a part of that group. So the Hawkeyes, man, the work up front, it might just be about done for Iowa in the 2026 class on the offensive side of the football. So I love that, right? Getting the offensive line work, get that done quickly in the class.
Mm-hmm. I think that they're very aware of, the realistic possibility of losing so many this established, efficient offensive line group that could departure next year. One could be eligibility reasons. The other could be draft aspirations. Like we lost Connor Colby this year to the draft, and I'm sure we're going to lose Logan Jones, a couple others. So to have that kind of established up front kind of creates less pressure to find that for later in the year, for next year. And, then you got, Brody Schaefer, a receiver coming in. You got Hudson Parliament, who's a defensive line. So we got someone on the line too. Marcelo VT, he's just listed as an athlete. So we'll see where he'll be. And then Cash Herrera, the QB from California, So to have now, it was 8 an hour ago. Now it's 9 players committed to Iowa. It just shows that Kirk Ferris in the portal, he doesn't miss a beat. His year 26, 27, still going strong in the portal.
Yeah, sometimes those linemen, it is kind of they get listed as a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, and a school sees them in the other capacity. And I think Hudson Parliament is also viewed as an offensive lineman in this class for the Hawkeyes. I think that's the expectation. So Nielsen, Parliament, Linder, Witters, and Gene Riordan. So they are loaded up. Did you watch the tape from DeAndre Smith by any chance, the huddle tape?
I did.
What do you think? And let me raise my hand. I'll be the first to raise my hand. It is easy to fall in love with huddle tape, but I like what I saw, man. He's 24/7 Sports. He's not a ranked recruit right now, Chris, but he is by On3, I believe. DeAndre Smith, let me see. Yeah, he's a 3-star kid according to On3 and Rivals. He's regarded as the number 150 receiver in the 2026 class and the 112 player in the Sunshine State, as they call it, down in Florida. He's from Neptune Beach and Fletcher High School down there in Florida. I love the twitchiness, man. I love the ability of him in the return game. And he looks like somebody that, to me, translates pretty easily as an obvious put him in the slot, get him the football underneath, and then just let him use some of that twitchiness and speed and go to work. But what jumped out about the tape of DeAndre Smith?
Yeah, his speed, easily speed. I saw from the first play I watched to the last. Anytime he gets the ball, he just is blowing by everybody. He could break some tackles, but I think his ability to, when he has a ball in his hands, to find that open space, not only that, but create the open space with his speed. That's something that he has a natural knack of. He'll have to come to, Iowa and really develop that to take his game to the next level. But, watching him, there was one punt return he had where he just cut through everybody and took off. It was very Cooper DeJean, Caden Weegan-esque, and we've dominated the punt return space for quite some time now. So maybe he could be the next guy up. Who knows? But yeah, his speed, man, is that speed is pretty crazy, and I can't wait for Hawkeye fans to really see that as he comes here.
Couple of receivers now in the class, both recently in Brody Schaefer out of Wisconsin, and now DeAndre Smith. Schaefer, a little more than a month ago, March 5th, when he committed to Iowa. So a couple of wide receivers that Tim Lester has in the class for Iowa in 2026. Okay, we've got basketball to talk about. Obviously, big news for Ben McCollum for the Hawkeyes on the hardwood. The picture starting to take shape of what year one might look like for Iowa and for Ben McCollum. But before we do that, and before we hit our one thing out the door, let's not leave the folks hanging out there in the chat. This is Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live. We'll be here with you on Monday nights, every Monday night right here, and we appreciate you in the YouTube chat. I'm Josh Hummer. He's Chris Meglio. Grant chimes in. Over under 18 passing touchdowns for Iowa quarterbacks this year.
I am going strong. We're going over. Don't know when the last time it was over, but we're going with it this year. Looking at Mark Gronowski's arm, he's a consistent deep ball thrower. And, with some of the targets we have, like Reese Vanderzee, Jacob Gill, Seth Anderson, you got Caden Weech, and hopefully he breaks out too, because I want to see his speed, man. So I'm hoping he breaks out. Then you got, don't forget, we're still tight end university until we're not. Addison Ostrenga, we got some pretty big targets out there that Mark Gronowski is going to look to throw to. And since we've kept that continuity with the O-line, who's going to surely give him some time to, sit back and kind of find those open targets, we're rolling with over 18. We're rolling with it.
Let's see here. I'm trying to dive back into the annals, and looks like 2018 with Nate Stanley would have been the last time that Iowa eclipsed 18 passing touchdowns on the season. Stanley had 26 touchdown passes that year. So you're going a ways back. You had 16 in 2019, so just came under that number that season. I think the better question is, if Iowa goes over 18 passing touchdowns, how many games are they winning? If they unlock the passing attack, because basically that's what you're asking, Grant, is can the Hawkeyes figure out how to be a competent throwing team? Can they find out a way to be explosive in the throw game at times? Not all the time, right? But at times, to be not totally one-dimensional. And if Iowa adds that to its offense, then, I mean, how many wins are we talking about?
That's a great question. I'm just thinking about how, our throwing game was not strong 2 years ago, but we still went 10-2. Should have been 11-1. The called back touchdown on Cooper DeJean was, not the fairest of calls, no pun intended. But I'm gonna roll with 10-2, maybe 11-1. But at the same time, you got to think about how much we lost on defense and what realistically that could look like. Not doubting our prowess to, for players to step up at all, but our defense might not be as strong as last year's or the past 2-3 years, to where it won't. Our defense might not carry us to 10 wins or 9 wins or 8 wins. It's going to be more the offense this year, is how I see it. And from what I got from Omar Young, his introductory press conference, it was looking like it's going to be run first, regardless of, who we have at quarterback. So if it could be run first, but still be way more effective in the passing game, you got to think that the offense is going to score a high amount of points more than last year, and certainly more than how it was 2-3 years ago. You got to feel good about what our win total is going to be.
And I think Tim Lester has been pretty open and honest about the fact that the throw game is set up by the run game for Iowa, which you hear a lot of coaches say that, but those Shanahan concepts, right? If you can run the football effectively and the timing, if Gronowski figures out, all we heard last year again and again and again from Tim Lester was, we have to get Cade McNamara. We have to get Brendan Sullivan. We've got to get these quarterbacks into a place to where they understand the timing of the throw game. But again, that also works in concert with the defense having to pay respect to the run game. So I believe what Omar Young said. I think that will continue to be. Look, it's Iowa. The run game is going to be important, right? The ability to win the line of scrimmage. And if it's Kamari Moulton, which I think, that would be my odds on pick, that it's Kamari Moulton as your lead guy. If it's Jazzy and Patterson, they need the run game to be effective in order to get to the point to where we're talking about north of 18 touchdown passes. But, if the Hawkeyes are north of 18 touchdown passes, I'm looking at it, the schedule itself, and we'll do this on a later show in more detail, Chris, but look, I see winnable games for Iowa if they can figure out how to throw the football. Indiana, you'd have to think, is taking a step back. You have to go to Iowa State, to Rutgers early. I think both of those are both winnable games for Iowa. Indiana, again, I think is taking a little bit of a step back. Wisconsin, you're going to have to prove to me that you are figuring it out under this coaching staff before it's the Wisconsin of old look, it's at Wisconsin, so that's going to be a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge. Penn State will be a tough game, obviously, with everything that they've got coming back. And then you host Minnesota. Oregon should be tough. We'll see about at USC. And then the final two, I think you should feel good about your chances to beat Michigan State and to go to Lincoln and to rip Husker hearts out once again. But if Iowa can throw the football effectively, man, you tell me, which games are you not feeling good about the Hawkeyes winning? Just off the top, looking at this, Penn State, Oregon, maybe USC would be three that come to mind.
I would agree with those. Penn State is probably the one I'm most worried about, just looking at what they've done last year. And I know they're losing Abdul Carter and, a couple others on the defensive end, but, that's a top-tier program that's right there, and they're with the best of the best. They were one game away from competing in national championship. So that that's a team to worry about. I think Oregon, for some reason, Oregon, tomato. I know some people call it different. I'm not as worried about them. USC, not as worried about them either. I feel very confident in what I was able to do this offseason, and the kind of versatility our offense is going to bring. And especially passing-wise, I expect a lot out of us passing. But Penn State is right off the top of the bat. The teams he just listed is kind of the only one that still makes me question whether, we're going to be able to have a consistent offense against. I think the other ones, I feel good about it, especially Tim Lester's offense. Like, we did very good with him last year, and that continuity, bringing him back, is only going to – you got to anticipate it's going to be stronger.
Drew Aller, where are you at on Drew Aller? Is he ever going to be the great quarterback that some people think that? Look, he was a 5-star signee for Penn State, but the end of that playoff game, sour taste if I'm a Penn State fan, but gives me a little bit of hope if I'm an Iowa fan thinking about hosting Penn State. One of the best memories in recent times for Iowa is that win over Penn State.
Yeah. That day so bitter for me. I had a lot of friends that, I was back home in Illinois at the time. And I had a lot of friends that came up for that game. All my friends rushed the field that game. And all I got to do is sit back and, reminisce what it would be like to do that because I was not there. But got to be a huge game. And I think for the next recent time, at least for the ones that were actually able to witness that game in person, or just Hawkeye fans that, were watching on TV, that's going to be a matchup that when we see Penn State, we'll always think of that moment. And hopefully, I think Drew Aller is an elite QB. He had a rough playoff game last year, but I think he's elite. But I'm going to take Mark Gronowski over Drew Aller. I'm biased, and I'm excited to see that matchup next year. We're going to see what that looks like.
Yeah, that has a chance to be a sneaky good game that week in the, just greater pantheon of college football. Paul, this is all we need. Hawkeyes, baby. We don't need any analysis, just simply Hawkeyes. Logan chimes in, are they going to be a playoff team in the future? I think I'm deciphering that correctly, Logan, that is Iowa going to be a playoff team in the future? Is that a realistic annual expectation, or kind of how do we feel about that on an annual basis? I think that, look, in a 12-team playoff and a 12-team playoff, Chris, that, oh, by the way, might be expanding in the next, I don't know how many years, within short order, you could be looking at a 14-team playoff. And I hope at some point we say, you know what, 16's enough, and this doesn't turn into March Madness, and all of a sudden you've got 32 college football playoff teams getting in. I mean, I do think to some degree keeping a level of exclusivity is important for college football, and to keep the importance of the college football playoff. I think at some point you got to cap it, right? But long story short is this thing is not getting, they're not reducing college football playoff bids. They're going to probably add college football playoff bids. I think every year you should go into the season and feel like there's no reason we can't be one of the 12 best teams and getting into the college football playoff. Iowa hasn't been to a college football playoff yet. Obviously, it has only been a 12-team format for the one season. This will be the second year of that. But I think that is a realistic expectation. There's no reason you can't be one of the 4 best teams in the Big Ten. And on a lot of years, if you're one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, I think you're going to the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think last time I saw something on the expansion, I might have saw 16. It could be 14, could be 16. I know for sure that's a serious thing that they're talking about upstairs in the committee. But you got to feel good if our defense could be anything kind of similar to what it was the past couple of years, minus all the losses. And if our offense could really be what, can elevate to a level we kind of expect them to, you got to feel good about our chances of, being a top 4 team in the Big Ten, having a chance at making the college football playoff. And if we do expand to 16, you got to feel good about that too. I truly believe if we have a 12-team format 2 years ago and we went 10-2, I'll forever say should have been 11-1. I think we could have made the college football playoff if it was a 12-team format. So I'm going to take my chances. I feel strongly about this team, especially about the offense. I think very highly of it. And, you do got Aiden saying, defense doesn't look very strong. I feel good in, the defensive development of what we've been able to show throughout the past couple of years or even decade. So, I don't think we'll take that far back of a step. I'm taking my chances,
I would imagine that Phil Parker is pretty motivated for this defense to get back into that top 10, top 5 nationally, total yards. The passing defense, the secondary took a legitimate step backwards last year for Iowa. So, and there's reasons to be uncertain about what that group's going to look like. We talked earlier today in Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live that corner, safety. If you can get secondary help, that would be good news for Hawkeye fans to go ahead and add and supplement the defensive backfield. So there's reasons to have some questions about the defense. Iowa is linked to defensive backs Gavin Edwards from North Greenville, or if it makes you feel better to hear maybe a program you're more familiar with in Austin Peay. He did spend this spring at Austin Peay before jumping back into the portal. Gavin Edwards, that is. Shaheed Barrows, South Dakota defensive back. He is visiting Iowa. So the Hawkeyes are linked and in the mix for defensive back help. So that is a legitimate question. Linebacker, look, you're replacing great linebackers in Jay Higgins, in Nick Jackson. That is a ton of production that Iowa has to replace there. But the one thing I would say to your remark, Aiden, is the defensive line. I think you feel really good about what the Hawkeyes have up front. And if you've got a great defensive line, Chris, that can solve maybe some issues you got going on behind it.
Of course, if you're able to hinder the run game, we've seen it in whether it's college football, NFL. A team that's hot in the run game opens up almost everything on offense. If we have a strong defensive line to hold the run game to, a certain amount of yards or just certain yards per carry, that a team's going to have to be a little more reliant on the pass. That way it's easier to adjust. It's easier to plan for that. And I think, it starts up front. It starts in the trenches. And even though we're losing arguably the best linebacker Iowa's ever had, definitely one of the best, and even Nick Jackson, just a very dominant player himself, that's going to be very, very tough to replace. But if that D-line could hold up and be just as good as last year or even years prior, our defense could be what it used to be. It could be. And I do want to say, even though we took a step back defensively last year, and by no means were we a mediocre defensive team. We were still, a top 20, 30 defensive team in the country, I believe. We just weren't a top 5 like we're accustomed to. So still pretty good numbers. And if we could stay in the top 20, even get to the top 15, top 10, again, 10, 11 wins I see in the future.
The conversation would probably be a lot different for some in the Iowa fan base if you didn't have the series of double-figure blown leads from a season ago, and everybody's hands were dirty in that. The defense's hands were dirty. Well, really mostly offense, defense, but probably the special teams units you could mix them into. I'm thinking mostly the main offensive and defensive units. Some culpability, big-time culpability in blowing some games a season ago. So if the defense had locked down a couple of those games, then maybe Aiden wouldn't feel the way that he does. But hey, that's a discussion for another day, and it's a legitimate discussion of, hey, does that worry you a little bit about how this season shapes up for the Hawkeyes? Poor clock management on my behalf, Chris. I will try to manage the football game more effectively in the weeks to come here, but we do need to mention, man, big news for Ben McCollum. He lands a big fish. Alvaro Folgueiras, a Spaniard, was the Horizon League Player of the Year from Robert Morris. Inked, signed, sealed, delivered. There's no discussion, no ands, ifs, or buts about it. He is an Iowa Hawkeye, a big-time addition for Iowa. The, again, reigning Horizon League Player of the Year, Alvaro Folgueiras. He signed with Iowa. He committed late last night and signed with Iowa today. A 6'9" forward. The thought is he's going to be kind of your traditional stretch four, Chris. Averaged 14.1 points per game, 9.1 rebounds, shot north of 54% from the field a season ago, was a great three-point shooter with volume from beyond the arc. So this is not, hey, he shot 15 three-pointers over the course of last season. No, he's going to stretch the floor, he's going to space the floor, and he can knock it down and rip the cords from downtown for Ben McCollum and company. A 41.3% three-point shooter a season ago. Good free throw shooter. That's important when you're talking about trying to lock down games late. So the Spaniard, Mr. Folgueiras, welcome to Iowa City, and get ready to learn black and gold, baby.
And what a big time pickup, man. This is a second pickup in the transfer portal that's not from Drake. I believe Brennan Hausen was the first one. But you got the two guys we got are sharpshooters. Like you said, 41% from three. And this guy also averaged over a block and a steal a game. So he has some defensive versatility to him. And, I believe he was a freshman last year. So he's coming in with a couple years of eligibility left. And like it says on the bottom, he's from DME Academy. Please, someone correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the last two players that we've gotten from DME Academy went to the NBA. I think it was Chris and Keegan Murray. Please, so if I'm wrong, please tell me that in the comments. But I will say there's a lot of potential with him. He could be a key player on offense next year. And for us, we needed someone in the portal. We've been we lacked shooting. It was pretty obvious we lacked shooting last year. And we lacked offensive versatility at the big, besides, having Owen Freeman who could get it done inside. No one can get it done outside in terms of bigs. So to have someone to stretch the floor and play a more modern style of what today's game should be like, this is a very, very good pickup for Ben McCollum early in his career. Team shaping out to be pretty good.
Here, speaking of Ben McCollum, here's what Ben had to say. First-year Hawkeye head coach on Alvaro Folgueiras. Alvaro is an extremely versatile player. He shoots at a high clip, is super competitive, and has won. We value winning. On top of that is his ability to pass the ball and trigger offense, which is what we needed. We're excited Alvaro is a Hawkeye. And I know that Hawkeye fans are excited that Folgueiras is a Hawkeye. Big-time shooter, legitimate scorer, will take some pressure off Bennett Sturts, who doesn't have to do everything alone. And the Hawkeyes aren't done. They're linked to Kennard Davis Jr., who, oh, by the way, Ben McCollum knows well, because guess what? He scored 20-plus with Southern Illinois last season versus Drake. Drake won both of those games, by the way, versus the Salukis. But Kennard Davis, who has been another guard that has been linked to Iowa, well, that's somebody that McCollum knows well, and hopefully that bodes well for the Hawkeyes in the transfer portal recruitment right there. They're not done. That brings us up to, I think, 8-9 names for Iowa basketball that we know that they've added. I think they're still searching for a legitimate true five, Chris, but man, Ben McCollum he's done a really good job shaping this thing up for his first season, and again, providing excitement for Hawkeye fans, which has been sorely missing.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And what the way it's shaping out to be is seeming like a 4-guard, one big lineup, something that's pretty quick and pretty versatile and could, 5 guys to stretch out the floor. We definitely need a true big. That is something that we do lack. Having an Owen Freeman in this case, if we were able to retain him, would be pretty nice for this lineup. Obviously he went to Creighton, but if we can get a player kind of the likes of him, it's always nice to, as much as it's nice to stretch the floor, it's always nice to have that player that can get it done inside and to create constant pressure on the inside. Alvaro seems like a guy that, will probably be more on the outside in the perimeter and, could be a pick and roll, a dominant pick and roll duo with Ben Sturts. I'm excited to see what that looks like. And to have another guard, like the guy you just said, who's, could be another option for us. Be very good to have guard versatility. It's kind of a guard-driven game these days, but we need that big. And I'm sure Ben McCollum's doing his homework, and I fully trust in him getting that piece soon.
I hope that Iowa's just being crafty about this deal with Brendan Hausen. He, even in their signing release for Alvaro Folgueiras, they didn't mention Brendan Hausen's name. So I'm going to be optimistic that this is just waiting for the right moment to have the official announcement for the Kansas State sharpshooter. But that is like, come on, make the announcement. You're starting to make me nervous by not having officially announced him.
Yeah, heart shaking, man. We need shooting, and we need a guy like him who was lighting up the Big 12 last year. We need him. So fingers crossed, man. But I got faith, man. If he's committed, he's committed. So Ben McCollum, man, we got to hurry up on that one. We want to see him. We need him.
Well, we are just about out of time. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live. We'll be with you on Monday nights at 6 o'clock, talking all things Hawkeyes all the time, baby, year round. That's one of the cool things about this is there is no off season for Josh and Chris. Well, there might be. I might let you take a week's vacation at some point or vice versa. But we're here to hang out with you. The open spring practice is basically upon us. We'll be reacting to that in the near future here. Anything, one thing out the door, anything on your mind before we tell everybody adios and have a wonderful week?
I'm going to give you two, one Hawkeye football and one not. The Hawkeye football, I'm hoping to see offensive chemistry come along. That's one thing I want to see. And I want to see what the run game looks like. That's something that we have to, take note of in terms of spring practice and, what happens then. In terms of not Hawkeyes, NBA playoffs are upon us. I am an NBA guy. And I'm going to put my ticket in now. My hot take is that the Warriors will be in the Western Conference Finals at the very, very minimum. They're going to challenge OKC up in that field as a 7 seed. So mark me down, and if they come lose, come and tell me about it.
Took game 1 versus Houston, and probably shouldn't be a big time shock to see a legitimate multiple time champion in Steph Curry go ahead and flip that switch for the postseason. Maybe they are going to go ahead and end the Rockets season early. OKC, my goodness, they eviscerated Memphis. So yeah, it's a fun time of year, man. We'll be reacting to probably in bits and pieces the NBA playoffs with you over the next month or so, but mostly Hawkeyes here on Iowa Hawkeyes Primetime Live. For my man, Chris Maglio, fun hanging out again, my friend. Show number 2 in the books. Hey, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Yes, do hit that like button, share, subscribe, so we can spread the word and keep growing this thing and make it something that everybody wants to be a part of. But we appreciate you liking, commenting, subscribing, and being a part of the show. And until next time, for Chris, I'm Josh. We'll see you all next week. Go Hawkeyes, everybody. So long.
Yeah, appreciate it, my man. Hopefully something big comes. Hopefully we can talk about something very, very big next week. Hawkeye football or not. Let's pray on it.
I like it. Until then, so long, everybody.